April 21st, 1945, southern Okinawa, 14:37 hours. The ridge was quiet, too quiet for the men of the 6th Marine Division. The wind carried the smell of salt and smoke, and somewhere in the haze, the faint clang of distant artillery echoed across the ravine. Corporal William Landers, U.S. Marine sniper, lay belly down in the red clay. His rifle, a battered Springfield M1903A4, rested against a sandbag. The scope's glass was spiderwebbed with cracks, jagged like shattered ice. It had taken a hit from shrapnel not 20 minutes ago when a Japanese mortar burst near their foxhole. Now, the world beyond his rifle was a blur of dust and silhouettes. "Scope's done," his spotter muttered, sliding closer. "We can't see a damn thing." Landers didn't answer. His face was streaked with dirt, his left ear still ringing. Through the ruined scope, he could see nothing but fractured light. The lens caught the sun and split it into ghostly shards, useless. But he wasn't ready to give up his eyes. Not yet. Across the ravine, nearly 1,000 yards away, movement flickered. A brief glint of metal. A Japanese officer, binoculars in hand, shouting orders. His voice carried, faint but sharp. The officer was rallying men hidden in a trench line, and if he wasn't stopped soon, Landers' squad would be pinned when they tried to move. Landers lifted his head slightly. His spotter spoke again, low and nervous. "Can't do it with irons from here, not that far." But Landers was staring at something else. A wrecked jeep, half buried in mud beside them. Its shattered windshield still caught a clean angle of sunlight, reflecting the landscape like a mirror. He adjusted his rifle, eyes narrowing. The reflection showed the far ridge, the officer's position, and just enough geometry in his mind to make the impossible seem not entirely impossible. "Get me his range," Landers said calmly. His spotter hesitated, then raised the rangefinder. 900, maybe 950. "You can't." "I can." He wiped the cracked glass of his scope with his sleeve, squinting through what was left of it. Nothing clear. Just shapes. So he leaned slightly, aligning his iron sights instead, then glanced again at the reflection off the jeep's windshield. It wasn't a clear view. It was reversed, distorted, but his mind filled in the rest. Years of hunting back home in Montana. Years of training his instincts to read wind, drop, and distance without a tool. He took a slow breath. Exhaled. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. The ravine was silent. Just the low hiss of the Okinawan wind. The spotter's heart thudded beside him, the sound almost audible. Then, crack! The rifle kicked against his shoulder. The echo rolled through the hills. Through the mirror's reflection, Landers saw the officer jolt, stumble, and fall a full second later. The spotter froze. "Holy hell, you hit him!" Landers didn't smile, didn't speak. Just watched the reflection fade as smoke drifted between the ridges. What he'd done shouldn't have been possible. But in war, impossibility was just another kind of luck, the kind you made yourself. And yet, as the spotter peered again through his field glass, his voice dropped. "Corporal, we've got movement. A lot of it." Dozens of enemy helmets were emerging from the trench the officer had commanded, and they were angry.
The first rifle cracks came seconds later, sharp and echoing like thunder splintering stone. Bullets slapped into the mud where Landers and his spotter lay, sending up fountains of red clay and grit. "Down!" the spotter shouted, pressing his helmet into the dirt. Landers slid behind a rise in the slope, pulling the bolt on his Springfield. The shell casing bounced once and rolled against his forearm, still hot. He didn't flinch. His mind was already ahead of the gunfire, calculating how fast they'd cross that ravine, how many seconds until they'd reach the base of his position. He peered through the broken scope again, jagged glass slicing sunlight into streaks. The view was useless. He could see only distortion, so he switched back to his iron sights, the world shrinking to two dull circles of metal. The enemy had spread out, darting from rock to rock. They weren't charging blindly now. They were hunting the sniper who'd just taken their officer. Landers whispered, "Spot targets left to right." His spotter swallowed hard, lifted his binoculars. Two by the fallen tree, 80 yards apart. Third one in the trench lip. The first enemy head popped up. Landers fired. Miss. Dirt spat up a foot short. He adjusted, barely a breath's difference, and fired again. The second shot caught the soldier in the neck. Got him. More gunfire answered. The air was alive with whines and cracks. The spotter's hand trembled as he reloaded a magazine. "Sir, we've got to pull back. They'll flank us." "Not yet." Landers' voice was steady, calm in the storm. "They'll stop shooting once they think we're dead. That's when we move." A minute passed. Then another. The gunfire thinned. The Japanese soldiers were advancing slowly now, testing the silence, one careful step at a time. Landers closed his eyes for a moment. The smell of hot earth filled his nose. He remembered elk hunting in the Bitterroots, waiting for the perfect second when instinct took over thought, when the world went silent except for the sound of breath. He opened his eyes again. Through the mirror of the jeep's windshield, he saw a glint, a bayonet catching light. Another soldier, crawling up the right side of the ravine, trying to flank. "Got one moving right," Landers murmured. "Where?" "Windshield reflection, 3 o'clock." The spotter twisted, saw nothing, but Landers already had his sights fixed. He led the target just half a heartbeat, then fired. The soldier tumbled backward into the brush. His spotter exhaled, long and shaky. "How are you even seeing that?" Landers gave a faint smirk. "You learn to trust what light tells you." For the next 10 minutes, they traded silence and fire, one shot at a time. Every pull of the trigger echoed like punctuation marks in the dirt and smoke. But the battle below wasn't stopping. More soldiers were regrouping beyond the ridge, preparing for a second push. Landers checked his ammunition. Only 4 rounds left. His canteen was empty, his hands slick with sweat and dust. He looked toward the reflection again, but the windshield was fading under a layer of smoke. His last trick, his scope, was vanishing. The spotter caught it too. "We're losing the light." Landers said nothing. He knew. And when the next wave began to move, he quietly set his rifle down, crawled forward to a new position, and whispered, "Time to make it personal."
The ground was hot enough to burn through his sleeves. Every inch forward scraped against rock and shell fragments. Landers could feel his pulse thudding in his throat, one steady drumbeat against the chaos above. Machine gun bursts tore through the ridge, spraying dirt into his hair. The Japanese troops were closing in, confident now that the sniper was gone. They didn't realize he was right below them, crawling like a shadow through the smoke. His spotter stayed back, covering with a carbine, short bursts to keep heads down. "You're insane, Landers," he hissed. Landers didn't reply. He pressed his cheek against the rifle's stock, scanning through the narrow iron sights. The smoke was thick, oily, perfect cover if he moved slow enough. He could almost taste it, bitter in his mouth. 30 yards ahead, the edge of the ravine. Beyond it, the enemy trench, shallow, dug into the far slope. He could see boots moving, rifles shifting. They were talking, shouting orders in short bursts. Without their officer, they looked uncertain, but they were reorganizing fast. Landers knew they'd be calling for mortar fire next. He had maybe 2 minutes before his position was ash and holes. He pressed deeper into the mud, pulling himself toward a rock outcropping that gave him a better line of sight. The mirror reflection was useless now. Smoke had swallowed the light. All he had left was instinct. He steadied his breathing. 1, 2, 3. Then he saw it, a flash of white cloth, a map unfurled in the hands of another officer kneeling behind a machine gun crew. They were plotting new fire coordinates. Landers knew what that meant. If he didn't stop them now, every Marine on the slope behind him would be vapor in 10 minutes. He raised the Springfield, resting it against the rock. No scope, no reflection, just iron and faith. His first shot rang out, and the machine gunner dropped instantly. The second round hit the map carrier. The paper burst into the air like a torn flag. The trench erupted in confusion. Soldiers scattered, shouting. But Landers didn't move. He could feel the ground trembling now. Distant rumble of engines. Tanks? Maybe. Maybe not. He couldn't tell. And then, suddenly, the mirror caught light again. Through the smoke, the shattered Jeep windshield glinted one last time, sunlight bouncing off a clean corner of glass. The reflection showed movement on the far ridge, another group, flanking left. Landers adjusted instantly, using that faint shimmer like a periscope. His mind mapped the terrain backward. He knew the distances now by muscle memory. 2 deep breaths. He squeezed the trigger. The shot rang like a final chord. Through the haze, a figure fell. One more enemy officer, cut down mid-command. The reflection flickered out. Silence followed, just the wind and the hum of flies. Landers lowered his rifle slowly. His spotter crawled up beside him, breathless. "You just saved the whole damn line. How'd you even—" Landers finally smiled, just a flicker. Didn't need the glass, just needed the light. But even as he spoke, the faint metallic whine of mortars echoed in the distance, a sound every Marine knew too well. The Japanese weren't done yet, and this ridge was about to burn.
The first mortar hit 50 yards away, a dull whump, followed by a scream of dirt and smoke. The concussion slammed through the ground like a hammer. Then came the second, closer, ripping apart the edge of the slope. "Down! Down!" the spotter shouted, dragging Landers behind the rock. Shrapnel hissed through the air, clanging off stone. The world turned into noise, pure chaos like thunder layered on thunder. The air stank of burning cordite and churned soil. Landers' ears rang. He could barely hear his own breathing. He blinked through the dust, vision flashing white with each explosion. Somewhere to his left, a Marine was yelling over the radio for artillery counterfire, but the signal was jammed in the interference. The ridge was being erased, one shell at a time. Landers reached instinctively for his rifle, though there was nowhere left to aim. The weapon felt heavier now, its barrel coated in grit. He knew they had to move, or they'd be buried alive. He caught his spotter's sleeve. "Back to the jeep, go!" They sprinted through the chaos, heads down, boots slipping on blood-wet clay. Each impact behind them lifted the ground under their feet. The wrecked jeep loomed ahead, blackened from an earlier blast. They dove behind it, just as another shell hit nearby. The shock wave knocked them both flat. Landers' helmet flew off and rolled into the mud. For a second, everything went quiet again, that eerie, empty silence that follows every barrage. Smoke drifted upward, thick and gray, blurring the world into ghosts. The spotter coughed hard, wiping soot from his face. "We can't hold here. They'll walk the mortars closer." Landers didn't answer. He was staring into the windshield again, cracked, blackened, but somehow still reflecting the ridge. The mirror that had made the impossible shot now showed something else. Movement. 3 figures, advancing fast, bayonets glinting. Japanese infantry closing in for the kill. Landers checked his ammo pouch, 2 rounds left. He slid one into the chamber, exhaled, and rested the rifle across the jeep's hood. The enemy soldiers appeared through the smoke like phantoms, 20 yards, then 15. He fired once. The first went down. Second shot, a miss. He was empty. The third soldier kept coming, screaming, rifle raised. Landers' spotter fumbled for a sidearm, but the pistol jammed. The enemy lunged, and Landers met him head-on. The impact threw them both into the mud, grappling in silence, broken only by grunts and the crash of nearby shells. The Japanese soldier slashed wildly with his bayonet. Landers caught the wrist, turned it, and drove the butt of his Springfield into the man's throat. A terrible stillness followed. Landers knelt there, gasping, staring at the lifeless body inches away. His own hands were shaking now, not from fear, but exhaustion. His spotter came beside him, breath ragged. "You good?" Landers nodded faintly. "Yeah, think so." They both looked up toward the ridge. Smoke still curled from the trenches, but the gunfire was fading. The counterattack had stalled. What remained of the enemy force was falling back into the hills, their officers gone. The two Marines sat there in the dirt, surrounded by silence and ruin. Then the radio crackled to life, a voice breaking through static. "All units, Japanese withdrawal confirmed. Repeat, they're pulling back." Landers leaned against the jeep, eyes half closed. The cracked windshield glimmered faintly in the fading light. It had been their eyes when the world went blind. But before the moment could settle, the spotter turned to him and said softly, "Corporal, you realize what you just did? That was nearly 1,000 yards, with a broken scope." Landers looked out across the ravine, the place where one impossible shot had turned the tide. He just said quietly, "Guess luck's what's left when skill runs out." He didn't believe it. Neither did his spotter, because they both knew that shot wasn't luck at all. It was something else. Something only men who'd been to the edge could understand.
The rain came 2 hours later, a soft drizzle that turned the clay to red soup and washed the smoke from the sky. The ridge was silent now, except for the slow drip of water off torn helmets and the distant rumble of artillery somewhere far inland. Landers sat under a broken tree, his rifle across his knees. The barrel was dented, the scope, what was left of it, hung from the mount by a single screw, lens cracked in two. He stared at it for a long while, running his thumb along the shattered glass. His spotter sat beside him, wrapping his arm with a torn field dressing. "You know," he said, "I've seen good shots before, but that wasn't shooting. I don't even know what that was." Landers said nothing. He just looked out at the ravine, now quiet, almost peaceful. The sun was breaking through the clouds, painting the valley gold. The same valley where, hours ago, hell itself had opened up. The spotter leaned back. "When I tell the others what you did, they won't believe it." Landers smiled faintly, eyes still on the horizon. "Then don't tell 'em. Let 'em think it was luck." But his spotter shook his head. Luck doesn't pull a trigger that smooth. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence, each drop tapping against the spent shells buried in the mud. Then, a distant rumble of trucks announced the arrival of the relief column. Marines in rain pouches climbed up the ridge, faces weary but alive. A captain walked over, surveying the destruction, then glanced at the two snipers. "Who took out those officers across the ravine?" he asked. Landers said nothing, but his spotter pointed. "He did." "With no scope." The captain frowned. "No scope?" Landers handed him the rifle, scope dangling, glass fractured. The captain turned it over, then back at Landers. "You're telling me you made that shot blind?" Landers met his gaze and said simply, "Didn't need to see through the glass, sir, just needed to trust the light." The captain didn't reply. He just nodded once, that rare kind of nod soldiers give when words can't reach what they've just heard, and walked off. As the sun set, Landers stood at the edge of the ridge, the wind tugging at his torn uniform. Below him, the battlefield stretched silent and vast, littered with smoke trails, twisted trees, and the faint glimmer of water reflecting the last light of day. He raised his rifle one last time, sighted down the iron, and stared into the empty horizon. The world looked clear now. No glass, no distortions, just distance, wind, and memory. Behind him, his spotter called out, "You heading back to the lines?" Landers gave a quiet nod. "Yeah, guess we both made it through." The spotter smiled. "Barely, but you know what they're going to say, right? The sniper who made a 1,000-yard shot with a broken scope." Landers chuckled softly. "That's one story I hope no one believes. Some things are better felt than told." He slung his rifle over his shoulder and started walking down the slope, boots sinking into the mud, the sky glowing faintly pink above the wrecked ridges of Okinawa. The camera of history would never capture that moment. No photographs, no headlines, just two men, a ruined rifle, and a miracle made from instinct and light.